Barbie and Oppenheimer, or Barbenheimer as it's been called, was one of the most hyped cinematic events of the summer. Having two massive movies release on the same day isn't very common, and the fact that they couldn't be more different from one another gave Barbenheimer meme status. Haunted Mansion, The Meg, and Ninja Turtles have all come out in the past few weeks since, but the internet is still buzzing about Barbenheimer today. Both movies were made by very talented and respected filmmakers, and both have been highly anticipated all year long. Barbie had one of the biggest marketing campaigns in recent memory. Christopher Nolan sells tickets simply by putting his name on a project, and both movies have solid scores on Rotten Tomatoes. Barbenheimer was a box office juggernaut, giving movie theaters their busiest and most profitable weeks of the year. So this means both movies were totally amazing and completely lived up to the hype, right? Well, in my humble opinion, neither of them really did, but that's okay. If you did enjoy one or both of these movies, that's great. They were both well-crafted films that have made a ton of money and did exactly what they set out to do, but neither of them stirred up that much excitement for me as I left the theaters. Were my expectations set too high, or were the movies just not as great as I thought they would be? Let's get into Oppenheimer first. Christopher Nolan is a legendary filmmaker who's made some of my favorite movies of all time, including The Dark Knight and Inception. He's also been known for other mind-bending thrillers like The Prestige, war epics like Dunkirk, and high-concept sci-fi like Interstellar and Tenet. Nolan has a very distinct style of filmmaking. He knows how to set the atmosphere he's going for with brilliant visuals, a dynamic musical score, and powerful sound mixing. Sometimes a little too powerful. From the moment Oppenheimer was announced, it seemed like the perfect film for Nolan. It tackles one of the biggest events in human history and explores the complicated life of Dr. Oppenheimer. It has an unbelievable cast of actors and actresses, and it lends itself to some explosive visuals. Pun intended. I want to be very clear. I didn't dislike this movie at all. It's incredibly well made and masterfully acted, and the sound and visuals were impeccable, particularly during the climactic explosion scene. I saw the movie in IMAX, and it felt like I was actually shaking in my seat during that scene. Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., and Emily Blunt all give Oscar-worthy performances, and the rest of the supporting cast also nailed their roles. So, with all the praise that I'm giving this movie, why was it disappointing for me? I think the critical drinker put it best when he said that this movie represents both the best and the worst of Christopher Nolan. The technical aspects of the movie were great, but the script was very bloated, the dialogue was excessive and overly analytical, and there just wasn't enough emotion for the audience to connect to. I don't inherently have anything against 3-hour movies, as long as they're engaging and well-paced. I do think Oppenheimer was inconsistent on this front. In Act 1, we get snapshots of his life as a young man, including his education, family life, and even his infidelity. But it doesn't seem to weave into the story naturally, and almost feels like someone just filmed each of the facts on his Wikipedia page and put it together into a story. Act 2 was brilliant and gave me most of what I was hoping for from this movie. Internal conflict, external conflict, discussions of morality, scientific testing, life throughout the Manhattan Project, and of course, testing the bomb. It's what I thought most of the movie would consist of, but it was really that middle hour where we got most of that kind of stuff. Act 3 slowed things back down again, giving us a number of hearings and questionings that both Dr. Oppenheimer and Lewis Strauss had to endure. Some of these discussions are dynamic and memorable, specifically the ones involving Emily Blunt and Rami Malek. Most of these scenes, however, proved to be an endurance test, and this is the point where I really started to feel the movie's long runtime. All the dialogue and scientific talk portrayed in Oppenheimer was clearly well written and researched, but it rarely hits on an emotional level. We always hear that show, don't tell is one of the most important things to remember in storytelling. Nolan does a lot of telling and not quite enough showing in this movie. One of the most powerful scenes in the film is when Dr. Oppenheimer speaks to a room full of cheering, flag-waving Americans after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What should be a triumphant moment for him turns into a horror movie. The visuals and sound mixing create a bleak atmosphere and really show us how tormented he was by his own creation. This was really well done, and I wish Nolan had made more scenes like this to help us connect with what Oppenheimer was feeling in this moment. But great scenes like this end up getting lost in a vast sea of boring dialogue. All in all, Oppenheimer will probably win a lot of Oscars next year, and deservingly so, but I don't see it as one of Nolan's masterpieces. As far as his films go, this one is mid-tier for me. I admire it in many ways, but it's not one that I'll be rushing to see again. Now, let's head to Barbie Land. Barbie was directed by Greta Gerwig, and it stars Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. The hype around this movie was insane, and given the amount of money this thing has made so far, it's lived up to it. The trailer suggested that we'd be getting a fun road trip story where Barbie and Ken travel to the real world and experience fish-out-of-water antics that the whole family can enjoy. What we got was really different from that. Now, I know what you may be thinking. I'm not in the target audience for a movie like this. But the thing is, there are plenty of comedies aimed toward women that I absolutely love. Mean Girls, She's the Man, and Crazy Stupid Love are all examples of movies that some might label as chick flicks, but I still got plenty of laughs and enjoyment out of them myself. All that to say that I went into Barbie ready to have a good time, and there are some really fun elements here. The two leads were perfectly cast, the practical Barbie Land set was really well made, and some of the jokes really landed for me, like Kate McKinnon representing the Barbie doll that kids break and draw all over. Bowser also appears to have some competition for Best Original Song at next year's Oscars. But in my opinion, Barbie didn't seem to have a consistent idea of what it wanted to be. It starts off giving us what the trailers promised, but then we realize that the real world is just as cartoonish as Barbie Land, so the fish out of water thing doesn't really work. Mattel is shown as a massive corporation that operates like a 3-letter intelligence agency for some weird reason. Events in the real world affect Barbie Land, and vice versa, but we never get a good or clear explanation of how the rules for these worlds actually work. Do the humans who go into Barbie Land turn into dolls? Why do the events within Barbie Land affect Mattel's sales almost instantaneously? A lot of it doesn't make much sense. And I know the movie is meant to be satirical and not taken too seriously, but there should still be some semblance of internal consistency. And then we move on to the Smash the Patriarchy storyline.
Maybe your best course would be to tread lightly.
Now don't worry, I'm not going to go on some 45-minute rant like some people. But given that this is such a massive part of the movie, it does need to be talked about. A major theme involves Barbie Land representing a world where all the Barbies are doctors and politicians with large houses, and all the Kens are homeless, useless accessories that were made solely to complement the Barbies. It's meant to be an allegory, and a scenario that seems to tell men, let's see how you like it. The movie encourages women to be empowered and to become whoever they want to be. That's a really great message, and one that I'd hope everyone would be on board with. The problem is that the Barbie Land allegory, which is meant to be a reversal of the real world, isn't always used consistently. For example, Barbies get to be doctors in Barbie Land simply because they're women. But there's a scene where Ryan Gosling's Ken talks to a female doctor in the real world, and she tells him that simply being a male doesn't qualify him to be a doctor. He needs to make it through medical school just like everyone else. So, doesn't that kind of undermine the allegory the movie was trying to convey in the first place? This film presents the vast majority of its male characters as straw men, and portrays them in the worst light possible. Remember that cringy Gillette ad that portrayed every negative male stereotype imaginable? Picture an entire movie like that. Don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the film's efforts to empower women and to shine a light on toxic masculinity, but the way it was done was very surface level and a little too predictable. Now, it's not something that's going to cause me to burn a Barbie doll, like some people. It was just kind of an eye-rolling thing for me. But again, I do understand that the movie is meant to be satirical and not taken that seriously. The second half of the film has the Kens brainwashing all the Barbies into obeying them. Somehow, the movie never really explains how they were able to do that. And they go on to tick all the boxes of toxic masculine traits, one of which includes liking The Godfather? Yeah, I didn't really understand what Gerwig was trying to say there. But I will say, the Snyder Cut joke was pretty hilarious. After the Barbies formulate a plan to cause some Ken-on-Ken fighting, Barbie Land returns to normal. And then, the end of the movie gets surprisingly dramatic and serious all of a sudden. It becomes a story about Barbie's existential crisis and desire to become human. The movie acts like this was the main theme and conflict the entire time, but this plot point seems to take a back seat for a large chunk of the movie. Was this movie a road trip comedy, a fish out of water comedy, a feminist film, or a drama about existentialism. It seems to try to be all of these things at once, and in doing so, doesn't really succeed at any of them for me. While there was some enjoyment and laughs to be had while watching Barbie, it wasn't quite the sharp, hilarious satire that I thought it was going to be. So there you have it, my opinions as to why the Barbenheimer sensation didn't quite land like I thought it would. Given the massive box office numbers and positive reviews, people generally loved both of these movies, and I love to see it. I also love to see two films that really seem to be made with a lot of thought, love, and not to mention practical sets and effects, with not as much CGI as we're used to seeing with big blockbusters. As someone who loves the movie theater experience, I'm thrilled that these two films got people excited to flood the theaters, even if I didn't quite enjoy either of them as much as I'd hoped. Anyway, those are just my thoughts, so let's hear yours. Leave a comment, like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a good one.